Hey, what's up, everybody? JB here, Soccer Dad Pod. We are back. New episode. You read your dashboard. You know this one is a hammer,
Mhm.
as those say in the world of sports. You don't get many guests that know the subject matter and has performed said subject matter better than our guest today. So this is going to be a blast. On the line today is partner in crime from his basement out in West County, Zach Lewis. What's up, Zach?
Howdy, howdy. Yeah, I'm excited, man. I re-listened to the original episode almost, I think, was that over 2 years ago almost? And
Well, yeah.
it's crazy. Well, a year and a half ago, about 18 months ago. And just listening to the stories that he told about his background and playing in St. Louis and how we're still the best soccer city in the U.S., maybe next to his hometown. It's really exciting. And I think today is going to be a little different because we're going to focus on more of current issues and current topics. But I'm super excited. And the fact that he said yes again is just a credit to, you know.
Well. Let's call a spade a spade. Him saying yes again means we didn't fuck it up the first time. So
Exactly. That's my point. Yeah, we did something right. And
because I was worried. Like,
yes.
he's gonna ghost us.
Yeah, that's
Hey.
a good point.
So before he jumps on, real quick follow up. How was Fest, man? What'd you see out there? For our listeners that are wondering about the Academy Showcase Chaos, what was Phoenix like?
Phoenix itself was beautiful compared to here in St. Louis, where it was 20 degrees and snow-covered ground. To go out there and be able to take shoes off and walk around a little bit in the nice weather was great. I do think that this was the first fest since they added the MLS Next 2 platform into the group, and I can tell you that it added a lot of games that these college scouts and other people are having to go to, and so I have some criticism there, just not watering it down, because it sounds like I'm saying that there's not enough talented people. It's more the fact that some of these scouts are having to be there for 2 weeks to cover all the different games from the different age groups, and so I just feel a little uneasy about how many teams and games there are at these showcases, and they're all paying the same amount. So these parents that are coming in for these other games are paying the same amount, where you go to one of those games, there's no college coaches on the sidelines scouting, and then you go to another game and there's 50, and they're all paying the same amount. And the disparity, I think, is something that needs to be addressed at some point. But all that being said, it was a great event. For us personally, it was Grady's last event with St. Louis Scott Gallagher. So there was a lot of emotions for us, and they got to play another top team in FC Delco, which they had beaten last year to get into the playoffs. And so it was a very high energy, high intensity game. So overall, it was a great experience, and I'm really glad that we got to go.
Did you buy a ceremonial bottle of Budweiser and pour one out on the field for Grady's final?
No, I was terrified to even have anything near a bottle of Budweiser near the field. The MLS sent out a very clear and pointed message that anyone caught with alcohol or even inebriated could result in fines for the team and all these things. So they were very clear, even though they were selling it on site, by the way, selling it on site in one of the food trucks and in the main venue as you walk through. But, it was a great time. But yeah, for Mandy and I, a little emotional to see, that final event. But one quick story.
Well, hold on. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to save the story for a later time. We've got our guest in the waiting room. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Mr. Ramos, here we go. All right, everybody, we're back. The magic of post-production. You missed nothing. We are here, Soccer Dad Pod. Our guest has just jumped into the queue. We've let him in the door. We're going to be talking with him in just a second. I wanted to be sure and bring up one last thing. Zach was just talking about Fest. The other thing that I wanted to remind you listeners of, currently, February 7th, Soccer Dad Pod is going big time. We're going official. We are doing what every major institution in America strives for, and that is a trivia night. We've jumped right over mouse races. We're going straight to trivia. So be sure, if you're interested, you want to get a table. Tables of 10 right here in St. Louis. We, as you well know, we are club agnostic. There's no club that we're sponsoring here. We love all clubs. In fact, we chose the APA because who doesn't love dogs and cats? So if you want to come out, hang with us. Trivia is going to be based around soccer, of course, rock and roll, food and beverage. Hit us up. We're going to have a blast. And we have already made a rule that if one of the answers is sitting at your table and you miss that question, you're officially out of the competition. So that's the final rule. So hit us up, Soccer Dad Pod Trivia Night, February 7th. We're going to be out in Fenton. Tables of 10, all you can eat and drink. It's going to be fun. Come join us. So
I'm curious for our out-of-town listeners, and maybe Tab, you can chime in on this, but I think trivia nights are fairly unique to St. Louis. And so I'd love to hear if that's not the case. And if it isn't, I'd love to hear what fundraiser options you guys have outside of the St. Louis area. Because here's the thing, JB, I told you this. Jared and I were on the sidelines of that FC Delco game. And a guy came up to us and he said, "Are you guys the Soccer Dad Pod?"
And you were like, "No."
Why are you asking? No. I said, "Well, I'm part of it. JB's not here, but this is Jared." He said, "Well, I'm from the Bay Area. I was looking for a new podcast 2+ years ago and stumbled upon yours, and I've listened to every single episode." So Josh McKay, thank you for coming up and saying hi. And I hope that folks like him will reach out and let us know that trivia nights are definitely a T-Rav type St. Louis thing and unique to us, like Pro Vet Cheese.
So you're saying it might be like the Halloween you gotta tell a joke to get your candy thing?
Yeah.
That's weird. I never thought about that. That's true. So without further ado, the man, Hall of Famer, one of my idols as a young player coming up, watched him countless times on the television representing club and country, the one and only Tab Ramos. How's it going, Tab?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me on again, by the way. So I must have done something, or I must have not screwed up too badly the first time. Let's just say that.
So we believe that is the exact opposite. Yeah. The fact that you returned my email meant to us, we didn't screw it up too bad. So thank you for coming back.
I love your show. I love what you guys do. And, I wish we had more like you guys out there.
Well, I love that. Now you're officially, and we'll talk about your next endeavor in a minute, but for those that can't see him, Tab has these lovely framed jerseys behind him. He is looking like an official podcaster. You're definitely looking much, much better than Alexi Lawless.
Okay.
I think you look better in the denim jersey as well, but I really appreciate, you jumping back on, Tab. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, once again, thank you. I'm a big fan of your show, big fan of St. Louis in general, and I do understand the history of St. Louis and what it means to the rest of our country.
Well, I appreciate that. So if you're listening and you want to watch, be sure to go over on Spotify or YouTube. You can catch it there. Trust me, we actually don't look that bad for a bunch of older Xers. Zach, I'll give you a pass because you're on the bubble. Thanks. But there we go. I want to start off where what you just referenced, because in our previous conversation, which was episode 145, if you're listening and you want to go get caught up, it's 145, where we talk about, Tab, your background, your path, and where you landed, and just your soccer life, so to speak. But towards the end of that conversation is where we really hit the honey hole, and we were having a conversation about venues, and it came up. You brought it up. We didn't tee it up. You said, and I have it quoted, that Soccer Park was your Azteca. That was our Azteca. So, well, go ahead.
No, go ahead and finish the question if you had a setup, but yeah.
Well, here's the setup. The setup is quite simple because we are infamous on this show. We love rivalries, and we hate certain cities in this country that have a lot of flair, but I think lack some substance. So I'm going to ask you just a simple question. If you had to choose A or B, and we're going to take Jersey out, you can't answer your hometown. That's unfair.
Sure.
A or B, Kansas City or St. Louis? Give it to me, soccer capital of America.
Well, I didn't know. Listen, I you know, and I know that you're big rivals. I love going to Kansas City, but I don't think Kansas City would be necessarily in the conversation in terms of soccer capital of America. So I'll leave it at that, because I think it's for all of us that have gone through the history of soccer, at least in the last 4 or 5 decades, we understand what St. Louis means and what St. Louis is. So I don't think that's a conversation even.
Well, I appreciate that. So I'm gonna cut that clip. I will be sending that to my friends on the west side of the state. Case closed. What I want to do is go ahead. Let's get into some meat and potatoes. There's a lot of soccer action going on right now, from leagues, from national teams, tournaments, etc. And what we wanted to do, we wanted to start with the big dog, because last week was the official draw for the 2026 World Cup being hosted here in the States with our two neighbors, Canada and Mexico. Zach, go ahead. You're teed up here. Let's get this started.
Yeah, Tab, what I really want to know is your overall thoughts on the draw show. You know, if you could really dive into the theatrics of. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to ask you about that because I would like your opinion, but we can get that off air. I'm really more interested in the draw, right? So we are in with Paraguay, Australia, and then either Turkey, Romania, Slovakia, or Kosovo. And we're in Group D. We are the highest ranked team in the world in that group. And according to all those prognosticators, Group D is not the group of death, but we're 4th down. So what are you looking for in that first match against, it is against Paraguay on the 13th of June. What are you looking for from the U.S. on that first game?
Well, so first of all, I know that you're saying we're not the group of death, and there are some difficult groups. But having said that, I don't really think we can qualify groups of death when 3, it's a 48 team World Cup, and you have, potentially 3 qualifying out of each group almost. So, that makes it hard to make any group the group of death. But having said that, I think we were very fortunate with the draw. I think, where the draw depended a lot on what happened on 2 different things. One being what pot 2 team you would get, right? So you could get anywhere from Croatia and Colombia down to Australia, which was the weakest one of the pot 2. And then what happened in pot 4, depending on whether you'd get a European group, and depending on which one that was, whether that would have been let's just call it the Italy group, the Denmark group, or the Turkey group, in that order, right? So I think we sort of, let's say, lucked out on both, because obviously, Australia being the weakest in Group 2. And by the way, not that I'm saying Australia is not a good team, but it is the best draw we could get in that pot, and we should be happy about that. And then in terms of pot 4, I think we also got a pretty good draw, considering we were likely ending with a European team anyway. I think we got one of the better groups that we could get out of the European team. So I feel very confident about the group. I feel first confident about the team that we have, because we do have a good team with good players playing on important clubs around the world, and the team has kind of turned it around a little bit. So to answer your question on the specific Paraguay game, I mean, we just played them. Which, gives us the advantage of knowing who they are and how they play. Of course, a World Cup game is not the same as a friendly game, in November, in the U.S. somewhere. Paraguay is not, it's not like Paraguay is sitting at home thinking, oh, the U.S. is higher ranked, we're going to lose that game. They're not thinking that. No. But having said that, we're the favorites and we should win the game. So we should feel good about it. We should feel good about going into our last game against, let's just call whatever that European group, let's say Turkey, because they're probably the best team of that group. Let's say if it's Turkey, we should feel good about that. We should be going into that 3rd game of the first round having 6 points already, and that's a good place to be.
I have a follow-up, and I love your answer on that, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the emotional side of the game when we say things like, it's a good group, it's a good lot for us to get into. Does that add fuel to the fire for Paraguay and for Australia and those other teams? Or is that more of a pump up for Pochettino and that crew?
And that's a great question, because the answer that you would receive from our, let's say, delegation about the group that we have, they're happy about it. And if you want to feel disrespected because you're Paraguay or Australia, that's okay. But don't forget too that Australia and Paraguay are very happy they're in our group, because they could have been in Brazil's group or Germany's group or Netherlands group, right? So it sort of goes both ways. So I don't really buy that argument, because they should be happy that they drew us and not Brazil or Germany or Netherlands or someone else, right? I mean, or Spain. That's normal.
Love that.
Yeah, I compare that to, like, and we've all been there, where you go into a tournament, group of 3, and you get to the third day or the third game, and it's the worst thing that you can ever hear is, well, all we need is a tie, right? So when you have a group like this where it's like, oh, well, we just need to get these, 4 points or 6 points, it's almost like going in as the underdog, I think just changes the mindset. We're clearly not the underdog in our group, which is good on paper, but we'll see what happens in the locker room. This is where the maturity of the team and Poch and what they do will really start to show. I've got a question to you, more of a generic question, really, about the tournament and looking at the teams. I agree with your take that because of the expanded count, there's not a group of death. There are great teams spread out throughout the all of the groups. But I want to get your opinion, or your take on, who would you be afraid of? For example, you look at Spain and you got Yamal and the talent that they have. You look at Brazil and Esteval and the young group they have, and Argentina clearly has the Messi mystique, and they're really, really mature and still have a lot of young players. Germany has Germans. They're always bad. But then you have a country like Norway that has an Erling Haaland, right? And there's the growth of these great players has dispersed. So when you look at the tournament, like, which team for you would you like? I don't want any of that. Keep them away from us for as long as possible. Who do you like in the tournament from that standpoint?
Well, I think my opinion wouldn't be different to the opinion of what's out in the market already, right? Spain, I think, is the best team in the world, followed closely by Argentina, because I think this Argentina team is likely a little bit better than their 2022 team that they won the World Cup with. I mean, let's not forget Argentina struggled to win that World Cup. They won 4 out of 7 games. They tied 2 and 1 on penalties and lost the other one to Saudi. I think this team is better because that team was young. Other than Messi, that team was young, and now they're more mature. I think the players are better. So, but other than Spain and in Argentina, you still have to look at England. You have to look at France. I mean, these are and of course everyone's brushing Brazil off a little bit because honestly they didn't have a good qualifying. They haven't been good for quite a few years now. They've been looking to the replacements of, let's say, Neymar, and before that, the even better players than that, which is Ronaldinho, and everybody else. But Brazil will certainly be a contender in my eyes for this World Cup as well. So, let's say you fear a little bit those, but you just mentioned Norway, and not getting Norway in Group 3 is a big deal because it's not just Haaland. You also have Sørloth, you also have Odegaard. I mean, these are top level players that play for a team like that. So, I think it'll be interesting. I think, when you look at our players and the success our players are having overseas, like right now, like this week, like last week, not 6 months ago. I mean, our players are playing well. Look at what Pulisic did. Look at what McKinney's doing. Look at what Balogun is doing. I mean, these kids. Look at what Tyler Adams is doing. I mean, our players are playing at a top level now. So I think we should feel good about us.
Today's college soccer programs receive hundreds of emails a day from players wanting one of very few spots on their roster. Jared, Zach, and I, we all use Choose It Right for our son's communication process. The platform creates a simple resume format that includes academics, club and coach info, links for pics and highlight videos, and more importantly, The platform has a database of colleges, their sizes, locations, conferences, majors, and costs to help narrow down the search. Check out the Choose It Right link in the show notes and take advantage of the SDP discount on your purchase. Back to the show.
Let's keep going on that path. And you just named off about 5 guys that we talk about quite regularly on this show, and you'll be talking about on yours and every other podcast for the next 8 months until this thing clicks off. But I'm curious to hear, who are the guys that you think are not being talked about at that level that we will be talking about, say, June or July? Meaning, we know those 5 to 6 guys are clipping at a high level with teams all over Europe. But do you see somebody in the mix that's going to kind of rise up above those guys and be the hero, or at least have that kind of Clint Mathis appeal during the World Cup for 2026?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question, right? Because our team is, for the most part, still a young team, right? So our guys are still growing. But I've been really surprised with guys like Alex Freeman this year. He's, the way he's come along. At first, I was a little bit surprised he got called in, and now I'm thinking, man, with the progress that he's made this year, he may be one of our better players going into the World Cup next summer. And that's even if he doesn't get transferred in midseason, because there's always a possibility. I mean, there's already rumors out there, and not just rumors, there's real interest from Villarreal to bring him in potentially even this winter. And so if a player like that goes overseas and now plays for, Villarreal, which, by the way, is not playing well in the Champions League, but is doing really well in the Spanish league right now. They're in the top 3 or 4. So if he joins a club like that, and if he does well at a club like that, playing every day, that could be one of the players that's a real big surprise. And then I look at guys that are still playing in MLS, guys like Max Arston, right? You look at Max, and for me, Anthony Robinson has been our best player the last 5 years, right? And he hasn't played for the last 10 months, so we tend to sort of forget about him a little bit. But he was our most consistent player for the last 3 or 4 years by a mile. And he's been injured a whole year. And you know what? Max Arston has gone in there and made us forget about him a little bit. And I think that's a big compliment to him and what he's done. Here's the guy that maybe is not in general the best defender, but he makes it up with effort, and then he attacks really well from that left side. So I think those couple guys, and then there's the opportunity of a guy like Tillman. If Tillman can get going, at Leverkusen, I expect a little bit more from him, and I think if he has a good year in Germany, he could be another one of those.
Let me ask a kind of a closing question on the national team as it pertains to going into the World Cup. We've just talked about a lot of names, and they're all kind of thriving in their environment. They're doing their thing. But when it comes to the national team, we still need a leader. In your opinion, out of that group, who do you see as kind of maybe rising to the top that can kind of check the boxes, not only from a production standpoint, because they're all producing, like what Pulisic did 2 days ago, what McKinney did yesterday. They're constantly proving to us they can. But in the locker room, we're going to need the guy. Who do you like kind of going into 26 to maybe, be the voice, or do you have an opinion on that?
No, I do, and I know the players pretty well, obviously, because I've had an opportunity to coach them myself, so I know them personally. I think the one I would pick out of all of them is one that we haven't mentioned, which is Chris Richards. So Chris Richards obviously has been incredibly consistent, and he's one of those hard guys, just like a little bit like Tyler Adams, where they have that demeanor about him, like that I don't want to lose type of demeanor. And I think Chris Richards will, by the World Cup, become a real important piece of of the outcome that we'll have at the World Cup.
I love it. Well, let's move domestically. We since we solved all the problems. Actually, let me ask one last question. This is my 3C. Now knowing our group, we kind of know what our roster is starting to look like. We've seen the map as far as who would advance, 1v2s, etc. Looking at the United States' path, what would you consider a success at this point? Are we talking about get out of group? Are we talking, 32, 16, round of 8? Looking at what's ahead of us, what would you think would be a success at this point?
Well, I mean, you always, and it's funny because, we always judge our World Cup teams by how far they go, right? Without considering who you have to play, right? So, for example, I was on the 1998 team, which was a failure, and it's considered one of the ones that failed by far the most, right? But yeah, we had Germany and Yugoslavia in our group, so we weren't going to win those games, even if we were at our best, unless we got lucky. That was the reality, right? But you still look at it and say, well, you didn't get out of the first round. I think going into this World Cup pre-draw, without knowing the teams, I would have said to you, look, if we don't make it at the very least of the round of 16, this is a complete failure. And if, for me, success would be the round of 8. And now that I look at what our draw is and what the potential pathway would be, I feel exactly the same. I think anything less, when you consider the fact that just about every one of our World Cup teams make it to the final 16 anyway, right? We always make to the round of 16. Let's just say that. And then the fact that we just paid $6 million a year for a coach that's supposed to take us further, I would have to say that anything less than making it to the round of 8 this World Cup, for me personally, and playing at home, I think it will be a failure.
I love it. All right, Zach, bring us back domestically. Let's break down the home court.
Tab, we're coming into 2026, and it's going to be the 30th anniversary of the launch of the MLS here in the U.S. Obviously, you had a big part in that in different stages, and I just want to get your thoughts on where you think we've come and what we still need to do maybe over the next 30 years, meaning we're signing teams with $1 billion fee to come into the league. We're at 30 teams now. Things seem to be doing well. I think we're 7th overall in the world for attendance and watchability. We're doing great things. I think we're 3rd in average attendance in the U.S. for the top 5-6 sports. So just want to get your thoughts on the last 30 years, but where do you think we need to go the next 5, 10, 30?
This is a really, not only an interesting question, but one which if I had the right answer, I think MLS would come here and pick me up and take me right to the office and say, let's do whatever you're saying, if we know that's what's going to happen. It's a difficult one, Zach, because I think if there's one thing that I do notice, and obviously there's success in a lot of different places, so take St. Louis, stadium's full all the time. Take Columbus, it's full all the time. Take the new team, San Diego, that just came into the league this year, and they packed their stadium, and it's been an incredible success. But yet where it's not a success, it's in the culture of our people, right? And so what is the answer for that? So, for example, San Diego, incredibly successful team. People on the East Coast are likely not watching San Diego and have never seen San Diego play. That's the reality. Right? Their games are late. People don't really follow. You're on Apple TV and plus a subscription on top of it or whatever it is. The bottom line is people aren't watching. And I'll tell you what, as hyped and excited as I am about how far MLS has come and how beautiful the stadiums are and how amazing the atmosphere at each stadium is, because they truly are amazing atmospheres. When you go to the stadium, you go to the games. I'm still disappointed at the fact that I can still go to a bar 5 minutes away from here and no one knows anything about MLS. And I'm sure that's the reality where you are, and that's the reality of where everyone else is. And if, let's say in St. Louis, if you're in St. Louis and you love your team and you watch your team and you're a season ticket holder to your team, chances are you don't know a single Red Bulls player or a single Revolution player. That's the reality of 95% of the people that go to our stadiums. And so where do we have to get to next? I'd like to get to the point where I actually go to a bar and I don't see, I'm looking up sitting with my friends and I'm not seeing women's college basketball, golf, men's basketball, and something else, and I can't find the soccer game still, unless it's an EPL game.
Yeah.
Right. So the one you're likely to see is a league that's not even our league. It's a league in another country. So I'd like for us to close that gap. But again, I'm not smart enough to have the answer to that. I just know that there's a big gap there from where we are and where we need to get to.
Do you think though that with Apple taking the subscription off and just opening up to anybody who has Apple TV, I know that it's not a drastic change. It's still not network television or even ESPN. But do you feel like with F1 coming on to Apple and some other sports that are going to be adding on, do you think that might raise some of the profile? And by the way, I'm not getting paid by Apple.
No, and it's fine. Listen, it doesn't matter. We want to give credit where credit's due here, because at the end of the day, if there's one thing about all of this, and this is why I like, I love what you guys do, and I wish more people did it, is because we're trying to continue to grow the game, right? We all come from the same generation, which is, how do we make soccer better? Like the guys who are playing now and the people who are the new fans now, they think it was always like this. They don't realize what we lived through to get here, right? And so we have to deal with that. But I have to say, I think you answer your own question. Yeah, of course, it'll be a little bit better, right? But the bottom line is, we're already in a culture where I think if you were to talk to a lot of different soccer people, they know a lot more about the EPL being Saturday mornings than they do about when do their team play on TV and when does, it's a little bit strange, but I hope that at some point it could be a little freer and be out in the market a little bit more, and that it's not maybe not being in a subscription type situation helps, but can Apple also share with maybe other networks and show the game a little bit more?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where a lot of the reality of the situation is right in front of our face, but they're such steep hills to climb, you don't know how to overcome it. For example, you just talked about the fandom for EPL. I can't prove it. There's no college paper that's been written on it yet. But my theory is quite simply, if you look at the new generation of kind of rabid fans that are that 20 to 35, right? That, I'm a Gunner, or I'm a Blues fan, or, I'm a Liverpool fan, whatever. They met the game through a video game, right? So there's that part of it. And frankly, the EPL pays. Their players are the most popular players in the world, and they're making MLB, NFL style money, right? And social media latches onto that. But here's where I want to go with this, though. The question is a little bit of a compare contrast with the other league that is making significant strides and moves here in America. And I love everything they're doing, frankly, for exactly what you kind of touched on, and that is culture. And the USL and what they're doing or trying to do. And again, they've got a lot of steep hills to climb themselves, but the locations, how they're embedding in the community, their TV contracts, they're on CBS, right? They've got a game every now and then on CBS, easy to access. They're kicking out and rolling out this potential, we don't know what it's really going to look like, but pro rel. And these are things that the EPL fan in America understands, and everybody hates the man. And to a degree, in social, media circles, soccer circles, MLS is the man. Can you take a second and just maybe give your 10,000-foot view synopsis of what the USL is doing and how that plays into growing the game here, getting more people involved, the culture, et cetera?
Yeah, USL has a little bit more of a community feel, right? And maybe that's why people are saying, or people overseas can relate to that a little bit more. USL is more of a town-like atmosphere when you go to the games. It's the people from their community that just walk up and go to the games. But I think here's the important part. By the way, USL is miles away from MLS. I mean, not only is it not close, but it's not anywhere near. And I'm a big fan of what USL is doing, by the way, because I love the community feel type thing. I think that's what really works. But yet, when you look at numbers of how many people are watching on TV, if you saw last year's finals, and I'm sure this year will be different because Messi was in the final, so I'm sure MLS's numbers will be a little bit higher. But last year's finals for MLS and USL were about the same, in terms of how many people watch. And I go to this, which is the importance of, how important to have free TV is, right? Because USL gets in front of the same amount of people that MLS does, and yet their budget is so small. I mean, they're so far away, right? So imagine if MLS would have taken the last 2 years in which we've had Messi and just blasted that everywhere on regular TV. Think how many more people would be watching MLS now than were watching before. And I think this has been an incredible window that maybe, I'm not saying we're missing it because, by the way, my kids go to school at my local high school, and there might be a Messi or two jersey here, a pink jersey, right? So it's kind of spread, right? That pink Messi jersey is kind of spread a little bit all over the country. I know you guys are pink too, but that spread a little bit.
Hold on, that's City Red. That's not
City Red.
It's
I'm
called
sorry,
City Red.
Okay, City Red. City Red. No, but that's something that I think we missed out the last couple of years. That USL is getting that right. They're maximizing their visibility, and I think MLS hasn't been able to do that, and that's unfortunate.
Let me ask you one more follow-up question about MLS along the lines of what we're discussing right now, that being culture and kind of fandom and the connectivity. I want to go back to the final that you just referenced, the Miami final. They win, Messi and crew, they win. And one of the things that was making the rounds was the reality that out of the starting 11 and even the whole bench all the way down to the last rostered player, there was not a single American player that was part of the process. And in today's environment with what's going on, in MLS, and you look at even college and club, there's this influx of really high level talent that is foreign talent. And if we're trying to grow a domestic fan base to really engage these leagues, it is really hard for the new soccer fan to kind of find a team when they don't connect, in my opinion, because it's like the Olympic effect. None of us like synchronized swimmers unless it's an American, swimming for a gold, right? And I look at these teams. Do you think that this is something that, and here's where I'm going with this, Miami in particular, Cramachi is one of the next gen kids that looks like he has the potential to represent us, at a much higher level. He's in Europe now, and I get it. It's better over there. But at some point, do you believe MLS and US soccer should be like, well, hold on a second. It's good for both of us. Can we figure that out? Or has that ship sailed?
How much time do we have on this? Because I really want to, roll up my sleeves on this one.
Hey,
seriously, we have to do that. Listen, the MLS has become a foreign league, and so has college soccer. So for all the people out there who are thinking, hey, I want to get my kid ready to go so that I can go to college, man, you better be training a lot more because college is for foreign players now. And that's where a lot of us grew up through college. So it's, you consider now that if college is mostly for foreign players and MLS doesn't have that many American players playing on teams, where are our guys going? So where's the progress for us? And I get it. Look, professional league, I totally get it. You should have the best players you can buy at all times. That's, at the end of the day, that's what fans want to see. They want to see the best players. All right. So the Premier League is no different. What was it? Arsenal a couple of years ago didn't have a single English player on the team, right? Right. It happens, right? So that's not the problem. Where I worry is a little bit about the development of our players because we haven't been a soccer nation for too long. And so we still need our players to develop. And we have all these MLS academies and they have all these fancy analytics to let you know whether a player is good or bad or whatever. But where's that player going if they're not playing for their team? So it's a long conversation. I think it starts with college for sure. But MLS has to play. I don't know if you will get to the point where once again somebody's going to come along and say, "Hey, can we do like the NASL used to do, where you have to have two Americans on the field?" I mean, I don't know if we get to go backwards at some point.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up to that, because while I don't know if that's going to happen at the MLS level, do you think it should happen at the college level? Do you think there should be some restrictions on age and, origin for college eligibility?
Well, I mean, but this is a longer conversation, because don't forget, when you talk about college, you have to include the women's game, and they go together. They go hand in hand, and this is why when I was at U.S. Soccer, we try to implement like a double season league for college, so that I don't know if you remember back then, but I started this program in which I invited, when I was technical director for U.S. Soccer, it was Nike schools at the time, because they were sponsoring it a little bit, but I invited most of the ACC teams to play a FIFA rules spring season. They would all play each other, and it would be 90-minute games counting from 0 to 90. It would be the regular FIFA rules, with the substitutions, no re-entry, that kind of thing. And it was starting to go pretty well. But then when you try to make it bigger, and so now you have to include the women's game, which is okay. That's what you have to do. But not necessarily everyone's in agreement, because the college game and women's soccer is so much bigger than the men's game. So now there's only so many places you can go. So I think something should be done in college, but I just don't know that it will be able to get done because of all the NCAA rules. I know that they're trying to implement different rules now. I just don't think they will get very far.
Well, if you had to choose, because recently there was that white paper that was released for college soccer, that there was a panel of advisors, consultants, etc., and it came down the pipe, and it seemed as if most of the participants, including athletic directors as well as U.S. Soccer, seemed to be at least in agreement that this feels like a good plan. And a lot of the parameters that were included in there kind of looked a lot like Olympic rules, where there would be a 23 as an age cap, and then you'd have room for 2 or 3 exceptions. And then there would be, you get 4 years of eligibility in 5 years' time, just some pretty basic stuff. Out of all of that, if you get the keys to the car again, pick one thing. Where would you start? Like, in order to make the snowball big, we got to roll it a little bit. What would be one thing you would do that you think might benefit not only national development of players, but improve the college game overall?
I really don't have an interest in improving the college game. What I do have an interest is improving the American player and having the American player have more opportunities in college. I think that's really important. I think, when you look back to the 70s and Title IX was implemented, this was obviously great for women, but it certainly hurt the men's game, and it delayed the men's game likely by decades, because now, if Title IX had been put together not by count of people, but by sport, then it would be a different story, right? But now, when you have to count the men's programs and the 120 football players that you have, and so now the college game could have been, for me, a game that could have helped our American game develop so much faster, because the facilities are incredible, and because likely we could have had so many more men's players and in conferences like the SEC, or conferences that really don't have men's soccer, which could help the game. So I think at the end of the day, I would like, if there was one thing, because that was your question, if there was one thing we can do, for me, it would be to limit scholarships to foreign players in college. I think if you limited the scholarships to foreign players and said, and let's say you could have only just 1 or 2 to foreign players, the rest have to go to American citizens, I think that would help the game for us.
Cool. Go ahead,
I like
Zach.
the idea, and I know many people that are listening to this would probably agree with you. And I think there's a lot of changes that are being thrown out there, but I really appreciate your thoughts on that. Going a little bit deeper now into the kind of the youth game and all the way up and through college, this cycle has happened at least 3 times in my lifetime, which is now we're going back to graduating year as far as your banded class for your team. We were grad class for a decade. Then they switched it about a decade ago to birth year, and now we're going back to graduation year. And I don't have a ton of thoughts on this. I know it drives a lot of content out in the sphere, but do you, Tab, have any thoughts on the appropriate usage of the age ranges and how that could affect the American player, meaning the graduation year versus birth year debate?
Yeah, and I was in the middle of the change about 10 years ago, right? Because that's when I was the technical director, the youth technical director, U.S. Soccer. And there's so many components to this that you wouldn't believe. Number one, I wanted to protect the best players. I wanted to do what was best for the national teams. And what was best for the national teams is to have the players who are born January 1st, or beginning of the year, be in the strongest possible scenario, because that's what the rest of the world, I wanted to compete with the rest of the world. So as you know, because I'm sure you've seen studies over the years, the oldest players in each age group usually do best for a long time. They become more confident people, more confident players, and over years they develop into the best. I'm not saying that's okay, right? But this will happen regardless of when the cutoff is anyway. Right. So I wanted to put us on par with the rest of the world so that our early, and by the way, I'm September. Most of my kids are born later in the year. So it was no advantage from that end. There was, at some point you have to have the cutoff. So that is what it is. And at some point, somebody's going to be the youngest in the year, no matter what. So we know that. Now, what I found with the way it was that, okay, so you go by graduating year or you go by school cutoff. So then I found that some schools cut off by August 1st, some did September 1st, some did October 1st, some did October 15th, some did November 1st. So it all depended. So it wasn't one uniform across the country, right? So that was already different. And so to me, it didn't make sense that every place was different in the first place. So, and some people hold their kids back, some have them, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so many different components. So I said, okay, well, the rest of the world does January 1. I know that, at certain age groups, you're going to get hurt. So you're going to get hurt a little bit when you go from grammar school or middle school to high school, right? Because that's the year where you don't know if you have a team, or you have a team half the year and the other year you don't have it. But we had the academy at the time. So our development academy covered that, right? So it's a very difficult question to answer, but the bottom line was we want to be competitive with the rest of the world. And to be competitive with the rest of the world, let's at least have the same starting point. Now it goes back to school year, so I think it goes back to the way it was.
Do you think it might be one of those kind of traditionally American things where we're just overthinking and focusing on a potential non-issue? And where I'm going with this is there's a lot of reality, not research, reality. When you look at true soccer nations like Brazil and Argentina, France, Spain, in which the Netherlands in particular, where it's not so much about birth year, school year, because they're all on birth year. That's non-negotiable, but it's playing styles and it's the culture. Futsal in particular is massive in most of those countries I just named. A lot of them, the Netherlands in particular, they stay at smaller sided games much longer, like 7v7 and 9v9, up until the early teens, and then pull kids out to full field. And I've heard a lot of different theories as to why they do that. A lot of it is dependent upon, well, until you hit puberty, a full-size field is a pain in the ass for little bitty short legs, so there's that.
It's too big.
And I'm looking at what's going on in America, and it's this just constant growth of club and this pay-to-play argument. And in Texas in particular, Texas is now kind of ahead of the curve in growing and promoting an extended 7v7 and 9v9 formats into the 12, 13, 14-year-old age groups. Do you see that as something to where we can get out of the weeds of when you were born? Why don't we look at how we're playing and what style we're playing to maybe help grow the game here from a quality standpoint?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, analytics are playing such an important part of our youth development now, in particular through MLS, right? They have all these different ways of analyzing who's good and who's not great, who's making plays and who's not. At the end of the day, I'll agree with you on this, that you're going to get better by being involved in game actions, right? So the bigger the field, likely the less ball's going to be near you. The less likely it is that there's going to be an opponent near you. So in the end, you have less game actions. So the smaller you make the field, the more game actions you're going to have, and the more you're going to learn. So I will leave it at that. I agree that the longer you keep the field smaller, the better.
Well, it's funny because one of your buddies, a beloved St. Louisan himself, we were talking to him a little while back. He coached Zach's boys last season, Mr. Sorber. We were joking with Mike about training and all this stuff. And we're like, what do you do? He goes, well, it's simple. I play. Then I talk a little, and then they play some more. Then I talk a little less, and then I have them play more. And that's his training. That's his strategy.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. But think about this, and this is where we are in America today, right? So I took all my licenses. I have my pro licenses. And so I feel like I have not that I know everything, by the way, but I have a full education, right? So I can put all my education aside and say, go play games. That's how you're going to learn the best, right? But if it was an average Joe coach, dad, who just goes to the field and throws out a ball and says, hey, guys, just play. We're going to play small-sided games. The rest of the parents would be on the sideline going, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. That's why he's doing that, right? And so you kind of need somebody like Sorber to say, hey, keep it simple. All you have to do is play the game. That's how you learn the most. I totally agree with that.
I love it. Well, let's move on to the newest chapter in the tab world. You are joining us from your new basement studio, I'm assuming. Are we in the garage? Are we in the attic? Did your wife give you an actual space?
Oh, it's just a basement. This is where I usually watch games. So if we can get to my TV, there we go. That's where I watch games. I set it up making it seem like it's a studio, but it's really not.
We won't tell anybody, even though you just showed everybody on camera.
Don't show anyone that, of course.
So tell us about the new pod. Tell us who you're working with. Talk a little bit about why. I'm assuming the subject matter is not pickleball. It's probably soccer. What do you guys have going on, man?
Yeah, so I started a podcast with Tom Bogert called Inside American Soccer. It's a lot of fun. Tom is such a well-informed guy. He's from New Jersey. Actually, as part of our funny story is he used to play at my club, the club I founded. So he was a player in the club. I actually took him to a trip to Argentina when we played. We went down there and played River Plate and a couple teams and got hammered and that's kind of how his introduction, as he says, that trip is when I knew I wasn't going to be a professional player. But yeah, so Tom and I have a good relationship. We started this show that's fun, but it's basically mostly about American soccer only. And so it's fun. We're on iHeartRadio, and I think they stick it on YouTube also. But it's mostly for iHeartRadio.
So, given that you are who you are and your Rolodex is fairly large when it comes to U.S. soccer, having done pods for a long time myself, I know that one of the biggest headaches is getting the guest and scheduling. And then you start to think about who do you want, who's a dream, who's the whale, who's the necessary. Give me like a top three. Who's guests that you want on your show that you're like, man, I gotta have these guys on because this is going to be great content. Who are we looking at?
Oh, wow. So we haven't talked about guests really. But yeah, it's not really like part of our show. It's just discussing like what's happening with our national team most of the time. So it's not so much about bringing in other guests, but if I had to choose, wow, there's so many people that I'd like to bring in, right? I think for me, Clint Dempsey would be a nice guest to have on just because I like Clint a lot. I can relate to a lot of what he's talking about. We almost speak a little bit of the same language, I feel, like in terms of how he feels about the game. So I like that. I would love to bring Clint Mathis. I haven't seen Clint in a long time. And Clint is for me, and I don't know if I've mentioned it on one of your shows before, but Clint Mathis is likely for me like the most talented American player that I've ever played with, and likely that I've ever seen, because he was one of the few who could do everything: right-footed, left-footed, was fast, was good in the air, could dribble, could pass. He could do it all. And so I'd love to have him on and see how he sees the game nowadays, now that all these years have gone by. And then I would go to my friends. I'd go to guys like Tony Meola and Eric Winalda would be a fun guest to have. So these kind of guys.
Yeah, Mathis, we were so lucky. We had him on a little while back, and hearing him talk and tell his stories, the Watch story in particular, he's just one of those guys. You're like, as much as I love you as a player and watching you, I just want to go have a beer with you, dude. Like he just has that thing, now he's a soccer dad too. He's got his kids that are in the mix, and I have to wonder what the other parents think about that guy yelling at his son, right? What does he know,
Right.
Kick it, boot it. So
yeah, he was episode 154, so just 9 episodes after we talked to you, Tab. We got to talk to Clint, and for us growing up, and watching the World Cup in 94, to see you guys and talk to you guys was kind of a dream come true for us, and our pod is set up differently than yours with Tom, in that it's heavily focused on the guest, because
right.
I mean, JB, Jared, and I are pretty good at talking, but I think most people want to hear from you guys. I do have a caller who just dialed in. Dan Donegan would like to know a little bit more about.
Who is that?
No, I was reaching out to Dan. He's still in Arizona. We referenced the MLS Fest event down in Arizona, and he's still down there. I think he's going to be there for almost 2 weeks total, scouting and things like that. But one of the things that I just want to ask you about, you've kind of skirted around this question. This is not about the pod, so I apologize, JB, for kind of jumping the line here. But what are your thoughts on the pathway now, given all the age group changes, the college landscape that you mentioned, where the MLS is going, the USL, all these different things? I think we know, and I'm not going to answer for you, but it's not a linear path anymore, right? But what is the ideal path for you? Because you keep talking about, I want what's best for the American player to get better. So what does that pathway look like for you, from starting out from a youth on up? What does that ideal pathway look like for Tab?
Well, I think at this point we have the steps to have an ideal pathway. Although the youth game is getting a lot more confusing. I was obviously I went coach Houston Dynamo, then I coached in USL a little bit. So I sort of got away from youth soccer for about 3 or 4 years. And when I did that, I realized that now there's so many other leagues. It's not just the ECNL, the ECRL. There's so many new names that I didn't even know, like from 4 years ago. It's all new. So it's very confusing, in particular for parents who are new to the game, who are going through their first child's experience through the game. It's very confusing. In terms of the pathway for a good player, I think it's become a lot more simple, because in general, a good player will start with his regular club, will eventually be seen because he's one of the better players, will eventually move to the local MLS club and go through MLS Next, and then potentially go to their MLS club first team or overseas, right? So in general, it's pretty easy that way. And whereas in the past, we had to go, to the state team that was part of ODP, and then you move on to a regional team, and then you go to national team, right? So it was a little bit different. I think, the fact that, there are 30 MLS teams now. I think, it's great for soccer because they all have their development programs, and there's a lot more opportunities than there used to be, but it's still a lot more confusing to new parents who don't understand.
Well, let me ask you a closing question, then I kind of want to wrap all this into kind of a time frame style. We go from making it back to the big game, to the big dance in 90, to some successes in, the 2000s. We miss in 18. We're back in 26 and hosting. We have more players than ever that are playing in the top leagues and divisions in Europe. And not only on the roster, they're starting and they're being impact players. MLS Next Fest just had thousands of the next gen of players out in Phoenix. And there's so much going on. Grade United States Soccer, not U.S. Soccer, the organization, but United States Soccer as, you know, a landmass. Give it a grade right now in 2025.
And you're saying as a youth game or as total, just a total?
Just overall, top to bottom. If you were to say, come to the States, we have soccer, we're this good, from national team down to, you know, local club. How do you think we're doing as a nation with the world's biggest sport?
Well, because we come from that generation, I can't help to think where we were and compare it to where we are now. I would have to say no less than an A- where we are. I mean, the progress has been, you know, I'm not sure how you guys feel, but for me, I couldn't imagine we'd be here, you know, 30 years ago at all. And because of that, I will say A-, only because there's a lot of progress to make in terms of the culture as we spoke, but I think soccer is in a great place.
I love it. Tab Ramos, the man, not the myth. He's here. We got him twice.
And I got 2 stars now, 2 stars on this show. The next one, I'll get my 3rd star, hopefully.
You have some high-end merch coming your way that will have 2 stars on it, and we'd love to see it on your wall. Like, people are going to look at it and be like, what the hell is SDP? You know,
right, that'll be the next. It'll be the next jersey on this side. It'll be on that side.
There we go, man. I love it. Well,
I'm just excited. I'm excited for you, Tab and Tom, for keeping your voice out there. I love your perspective, and it's not just the experience, but you just have a unique way of explaining things about the nuances with this game and the culture, and it's really refreshing. So I'm so glad you have your own outlet now, and I will be subscribing as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome. So for all of you listening, I will be sure to have a link to the new show in our show notes. Thanks for making it this far. Send it to a friend. Like, review, follow, share, all that stuff. It's free. Like I said, we have very low self-esteem, so all those little clicks makes us feel better. So Tab Ramos, thank you again for joining us, man. This has been a blast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right.